Hello, and welcome back to another episode of plantcare.club, where we care about your plants. So, what do we do in the show? Number one on this show, we talk about your indoor and your outdoor plants, everything about them. Number two, we dive into new products, so soil, pots, new plants that are coming out, new varieties that are coming. Love to dive into those. Number three, we answer your questions. So if you have any questions, if anything you think of comes up while you're watching the show, please send us a message and we can get back to you. We can answer your question on the show. So what's today all about? Well, today is all about number one. Number one, it is going to be about the plants that are inside your home, specifically poinsettias. Now, I say inside your home, likely inside your home. When I visit Florida, when I visit some of our tropicals down there, I have noticed that some people will take their poinsettias that are inside the house around Christmas time and actually plant them outside in the flower beds. So I say indoor because most places in the northern hemisphere, yeah, they're going to be inside your house, but there are some exceptions. You Floridians are a little bit different down there. Okay, so poinsettias. Now, first off, who am I? I'm Fred. I have 6 years of greenhouse growing experience with our family business. And poinsettias are near and dear to my heart because we have been growing poinsettias for many years now. Poinsettias are really a labor of love when you are trying to grow them. They're a finicky plant. They're hard to grow. They take about 6 months in a greenhouse to really get to the right size. They take a lot of attention. They're pretty needy. So I'm not really selling this for you right now, but believe me, in your house, they look nice. Once Christmas comes around, once the holiday seasons are here, it doesn't feel the same if you don't have a poinsettia in the house. So everyone loves poinsettias. You're gonna get one. Now it's in your house. What do you do? Today we're talking about how to take care of it. Once it gets into the house, and it's no longer my job. No, I'm done. I'm done. I sent it to the store. You bought it. You brought it into your house. Beautiful. Now, what is the next steps? What are you going to do? So, very simply, we're going to walk through. It's not that hard. It's really not. We can talk about it together. So, first step, we need to talk about where do you put it. Comes into your house. Where do you get it now? Now, once it's into the house, you want to put it somewhere where it gets some indirect light. You don't want it to be direct light coming straight through a window and onto the leaves. In the greenhouse, it's not grown in that way. We have the plastic on the roof of the greenhouse. You see a lot of pictures of greenhouses. They either have glass or plastic up there, and the reason for that glass plastic, depending on what type of greenhouse, depending on what you're trying to grow, usually for poinsettias it's plastic, and that is because it's trying that plastic lowers the amount of light that's getting through it, and it actually lowers the light levels for the plants below. Poinsettias don't want direct hard sunlight. It's harder to grow them in a greenhouse like that. So if we're taking them from the greenhouse setting and throwing them into your home, it's very difficult for them to adapt if all of a sudden they're getting direct light straight through the window and onto its leaves. That's when you can see some leaves burning, going black, maybe dropping the leaves. Plant's unhappy. So, step one, try to find somewhere that is bright, but it's not direct sunlight. So it'll be near a window. You have to think about during the times of the day too. I would say on the south side of your house is a better idea. East side versus west side of the house, you're going to get sun either in the morning or in the afternoon. So you've got to think about exactly where it's going to be. But yeah, bright, indirect sunlight. Number two, water. So watering can be a tricky thing with poinsettias. Now let's say you get I'm going to say a 6-inch. If you get a 6-inch poinsettia, it usually comes, you'll have the pot, the grower's pot that's inside, and then kind of like a tin, like a foil wrap around the outside of it. So when you go to water it, I would suggest you take it out of that wrap. You get maybe a little bowl or a plate with like a little bit more of a rounded edge on the side, and you put some water in there, and you simply take the grower's pot and you set it right inside that water. Let the water soak up from the bottom of the pot all the way up to the top, And once it feels pretty heavy, once you can pick it up and it feels pretty heavy, then throw it back into the cover or wherever you have it sitting, and go from there. Now, I would suggest that most of the time, if you can appreciate how the grower's pot looks, try to take it out of that foil for most of the day, because those roots need to breathe just as much as you and I need to breathe. Those roots are looking for air, they're looking for oxygen. So if they are stuck inside the foil all the time, it acts as a suffocation method. Now, to the roots, and the roots aren't thinking about expanding and growing, and the plant keeps getting bigger. They're really thinking about how do we get more air. Maybe we shouldn't be growing anymore. Maybe we should just be giving up. Um, Here's my picture on watering. It doesn't make a difference, but there's my picture on watering. So um, think about it in the greenhouse too. In the greenhouse, we only have the grower's pots. And so those roots are sitting either, they're sitting usually on some black cloth, or maybe on a bench. A bench is a really good example of, so the pot is sitting on a bench, and underneath of the pot, underneath of the bench, is so much air. There's a ton of air that's moving underneath of it, which allows those roots to breathe at all times. Being in a foil wrap isn't exactly where the roots want to be. Another thing about watering is you don't want to give it too much water. I think in your home, the fastest way to kill a poinsettia is to overwater it. If you overwater it, those roots can really be affected by or fungus or maybe some bacteria. Something is going to grow on the roots, grow in the edges of the soil, and really attack the roots, and then eventually move all the way up to the stem of the plant. You can even get bugs like fungus gnats. It's very common that if the soil is always wet, especially the top layer of the soil, if that's often wet, it will cause fungus gnats to come. You'll be amazed where they come from. Who knows? They come into the windows, you open up a window, suddenly fungus gnats are coming in. They're finding that soil, they're laying their eggs, and they're trying to live on that wet soil. So you want the top level of soil to dry down before you actually water your plant. Now, if you want to go to expert level, if you want to go to expert level to figure out, okay, is it time to water my plant? Is it not time? What you're going to do is, my coffee. I have this for a reason, by the way. Okay, so let's say this is your pot, and your plant is growing out of it. You're going to reach your hand over top, and my hand's spread out like this. You're going to reach your hand over top of the soil, and then what you want to do is you want to flip it upside down, okay? So then your pot would be upside down. You squeeze the edges of the pot, and then eventually you can take that pot completely off. So now you have the plant that's hanging down here, you have the soil is all sitting here, and you can see all the exposed roots. And when you see all those exposed roots, you can see how wet that soil is. Now, keep in mind, this is messy, so don't do it on the carpet. Go outside. Depending on how cold it is, maybe go into like a breezeway. Go somewhere where there's a little bit of dirt can fall on the floor. But you take that off, and you can see all the soil inside. And if it's wet all the way from if it's wet from the bottom of the pot down to, let's say, halfway through, okay, your plant does not need water right now. If it's only wet at the very bottom of the soil, then you know what? Maybe you're at a spot now where you can actually go ahead and water that plant. At some point, I'll actually I'll bring a poinsettia and show you guys how exactly I do that. But it's not very tricky. Anyone can do it, and that's a really good way of noticing when you're going to water it. If you don't want to do it that way, just set it on some kind of a schedule. I would say every 3, 4, 5 days, depending on where it is, depending on what size of the pot it is. Smaller pots are probably going to need water more often than a large pot. Let's say a 6-inch might need water every 3 days. A big 12-inch pot and really big plant, it might only need water once a week, twice a week. Especially if you fill up all of that soil. If all of that soil is wet, it might need water a little bit less often. Okay, number 3. What do poinsettias like to feed on? So poinsettias like to feed when they're young plants. Poinsettias really like to feed on nitrogen fertilizer. They like to have a lot of feed at the very beginning of their life cycle. But by the time you're getting it, the grower will have taken their the level of fertilizer in the soil from all the way up here, and then they start to wean it off and slowly bring it down. And they do that because um, we have to time out exactly what size the plant is going to be. If you keep the nutrient level very high for a poinsettia all the way through its life, especially at the very end, it'll keep on growing. And usually when growers get to a certain spot, they say, okay, my 6-inch poinsettia is at 15 or 16 inches, and I don't want it to get any bigger. So then you start to lower down those fertilizer levels, lower down the amount of nutrients in the soil, so that the plant is not going to continue to be charged up and ready to grow. So you want it to be, when the plant comes to you, you can then continue watering it, I would say, with tap water. If you want to add in some fertilizer every 2 or 3 waterings, that's totally fine. But you don't need to go crazy. You don't need to add a lot of fertilizer to it. Keep an eye on the leaves. If the leaves start to go from, let's say, a dark green, especially the bottom leaves, so from a dark green to a lighter color, that might be an indication that the plant is not getting enough fertilizer, and so maybe you need to add a little bit more nutrients into the soil, into the watering. But outside of that, you're in a decent spot where you can use some tap water more often than not. Okay, next up, what does your poinsettia not like? This is cold. Most of us don't like the cold. I don't love the cold all the time. And but I would take the cold over hurricanes, especially, yeah, if every time Florida goes through another hurricane season, you think like, you know what, I'm very glad to have a little bit of a winter, and I get to avoid that. I'm done. To Floridians as well. I'm not making fun of you anymore. I promise. Not on this show. Maybe next time. Okay, so your poinsettia does not like the cold. Now, something that we suggest to consumers as they're taking the poinsettia out of the store and to their car, in a funny way, you have to kind of do that pretty quickly, because your poinsettia is grown in a greenhouse with constant temperatures all the time. And now all of a sudden, you're going to go from that to, let's say it's being set outside, or you're carrying it out to your car and it's 0 degrees Celsius, or it's pretty cold. That plant can go into shock even in that short period of time that it's going out there. So if you can, pre-start your car before you get out there. Keep that plant as warm as you can. Try to buy it from a retailer that's relatively close to your house. Don't let the plant get too cold. Now, an important thing to note here is people can kill their poinsettia, and a common way to kill your poinsettia, especially if it's in, let's say, your office, in an office at work, is people will set their plant beside a window, thinking, okay, we need to get some light, and maybe the plant likes the light that it's getting. Excuse me. So that's great. So the plant is loving the light levels, but the problem can be at night. That window actually lets in a whole bunch of cold air, and that cold air that's coming in, or it's colder near the window, and all of that cold air is really going to affect the poinsettia, and it's not going to love that drastic change in temperature over the course of the day. They want to stay in something steady. Most of the time, poinsettias are grown at, let's say, somewhere between 55 to 70 Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. So you don't want that drastic change. The poinsettias want to stay in a relatively small band. What do poinsettias not like? The cold. There you go. Okay, next up, your pets. I have a dog. Oliver is amazing. I like Oliver a lot. Oliver comes to the greenhouse with me every single day. Every single day. And I hear from, I will talk to friends, and they will say, I don't know, I have a poinsettia, or I'm thinking about going to get a poinsettia, but I'm really worried about my pets. Now, my dog is about 55 pounds. Actually, no, he is 55 pounds. I weighed him this morning. 55 pounds, and I have seen him eating poinsettias in the greenhouse. Especially when he was a puppy, he would find a little plant. He eats them sometimes. He will eat some of even the larger plants. He'll grab a few leaves here and there. Your pet is likely large enough that it can consume a small amount of toxins. Now, I'm not a vet. Please take this this is not medical advice in any way. If you have any more questions, talk to your vet. Talk to whoever. This is not medical advice at all. But your pet can take on a few leaves here and there. If the only way that you could be concerned, in my opinion, is if you have, let's say, a cat or a very small dog and they eat a full poinsettia. They eat from the top all the way down to the soil. They eat the stem, they eat all of it. Okay, at that point, yeah, head over to the vet. But and yes, poinsettias can have a level of toxicity to them, but that level of toxicity is always relative to the dog size or to the pet size. So maybe they're going to get sick. Maybe they puke it up. Um, Anything along those lines, it's never pleasant whenever that happens. But I don't think that this is enough of a reason to really deter someone from not getting a certain plant just because there's a small chance that this could happen. In my opinion, the chance is so low, and the pet would have to eat so many poinsettias that it's probably not going to happen. Don't be worried about it. It's probably not going to happen. Anyway, I don't want to move on from that one. So, last note that I have about poinsettias here is more of an expert mode. So let's say you want to propagate your poinsettia. Let's say you want to propagate your poinsettia. So you want to take some cuttings off it. You want to see if you can root it yourself. That is an awesome goal, and I think that's great. Let me give you some ideas on how exactly to do it. So when you get your poinsettia, it's going to come into your home, and usually at the very top of it, you see all the red leaves, and in the center of the red leaves, there's something they call a cyathea, and that has all the little like yellow pollen, right? There's kind of a little ball, and it's got a little bits of pollen and some seeds in there. So you do not want to cut that off and then try to plant that. That's a flower. That's not going to go very well. If you want to propagate, I would suggest you keep your poinsettia and you bring it all the way through the winter into the spring. It's going to drop a bunch of bottom leaves, but that's totally normal. So now you've got your poinsettia there with some new growth. So brand new growth is coming off the sides. You can see new shoots that are coming out. What you want to do is you want to take one of those new shoots, and you want to count about 5, 6 leaves from the top down. So there's a top leaf, and then let's say there's a few more shoots coming out the side of it, and then all the way down, and then you want to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once you get to the 6th one, you can take a cutting. So you cut that off, and you take the cutting. You want to put it in soil that can drain relatively well. So maybe it's a mix of some sand and some actual soil. That way, it's not going to be susceptible to some of those root issues and root problems. So you have your cutting. You're going to plunk it into that soil mixture that you have. I would suggest a small pot. The smaller the better. Even a 2-inch, 4 inches is reasonable. And you want to plunk it into there and then add some water. Now, at the young stage of those plants, they need to take on their nutrients through their leaves because they don't have a fully grown root system yet. So this is when you should mist your plant. Try misting it, especially if it's going to be a sunny or a bright day through the spring or the summer. You want to mist your plant relatively often. I would say maybe once every 20 minutes, if you can, if that's possible. So you want to keep that plant relatively moist through the night. You don't have to mist it as often. Maybe, you can really forget about it during the night. But during the day, when the water can evaporate off of the leaves, you want to keep some water on there in order to keep that leaf moist. If the leaf goes dry and then there's a bunch of sun on it, that can dehydrate the leaf, and eventually that leaf might fall off. The plant might think, "Oh no, I've lost a bunch of cells on this leaf. I'm just going to get rid of it," and then it sheds those leaves off. So keeping those leaves wet is an important step. later, so let's say after a few weeks, you're starting to see some roots. Like maybe you can pull out that cutting and or you can clean off some of the dirt beside the edge of the cutting. You can start to see some roots that are shooting out. That is an awesome sign. So as you see more roots, you reduce the amount of mist. So those two really work hand in hand. More roots means less mist. And eventually, after you see enough roots, let's say the roots are 3-4 inches long, you can really start to shut the mist completely off. Don't mist them at all. Now let the roots soak up all the nutrients that the plant needs. Used to be bringing in all the nutrients through the leaves. Nope, let the roots do that now. So roots are soaking up all the nutrients. Now you can start to add some more fertilizer to that water. You can't add too much all at once because these roots are going to be very susceptible to big changes in the electroconductivity level in the soil. So you want to add in some fertilizer, but not too much. It's got to be a gradual buildup of fertilizer in that water. Another thing to think about is if that soil has a whole bunch of fertilizer in it, and then you go away for a week and it really dries down, when you come back, those roots may have soaked up a whole bunch of the fertilizer and then they go into shock because they're trying to get used to something. So I would suggest that you slowly bring those fertilizer levels up and keep an eye on the plant. It's going to be very needy. They're a needy type of plant, especially at this young stage. But once you can pull out your 4-inch pot or your 2-inch pot of your brand new poinsettia and the roots, you can see them all along the edges of the pot. They're all the way down to the bottom. They're all along the edges. Great sign. At that point, you can now take your plant out, move it into a larger pot. Hopefully this is midway through the summer-ish. If you want it to be, relatively on time for Christmas, move it into a larger pot. Maybe it's a 6-inch or something, and let it sit in that soil, root all the way out, grow up to be whatever size it's going to be. Now, there's an important step in here where you're going to have to pinch the top of the poinsettia. I skimmed over this pretty quick because that's a tricky subject. But once you see the roots, now there are two different schools of thought here for different growers, so everyone's going to have their own opinions. I would suggest once you move the plant from your, let's say, 2.5-inch pot into a 6-inch pot, and the roots are growing, give it a week or two in that pot to really see some more growth. Then you're going to count all the way up that stem. You're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And at the 6th leaf that you see on that stem, you pinch the head off of the plant. Now, you pinch the head off of the plant because now it's going to grow new shoots at every one of those leaves. Or that's generally the way the poinsettias work. So once you count to the 6th one, you pinch the head off, and the plant might go into shock for a week or two. It might just sit there and go, oh my gosh, what just happened? But eventually natural instincts will take over and it will you'll see new growth that is coming out the sides where the leaf and the stem actually meet. That's where you'll start to see some new growth. So if you can get through all of those steps, and like, believe me, I said it's a bit more of an expert mode plant to try to do at your own home. And it definitely is. It is difficult for a lot of growers within a greenhouse and at a commercial facility. So to do it at your own home is a really ambitious endeavor. And I applaud you if you can do it. I'd love, if anyone has pictures, if anyone has done this before, I'd love to see some of your results and to see how the actual plant shaped out. So with that said, that's all that I got for you today on poinsettias. So if you like the show, please send this to some friends, write a review, give us a like. If you have any questions, if this spurred on any questions that you want us to answer, maybe you want us to talk about a different plant that you have or something else, maybe you want us to go more in depth on any one of the steps that we've brought up today, please send us a message and we can get back to you on that. We can answer it on the show from time to time. From me, that's all that I've got for today. And thanks. I will talk to you again soon.